I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you for, exciting last minute changes. Adam, do you want to play the intro slide or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can get it going.
Okay. And Bruce, I think.
Let them all in?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to put everyone on mute for now, except for Hannah and Adam.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Acting for Change, Creating Justice, a Shmita-inspired speaker series hosted by Ekar Farms here in Denver, Colorado. This is part 3 of a 6-part series that's happening once a month on Sunday mornings. I particularly want to welcome the Rhythms for Change cohort here in the Front Range, as well as the cohort in Ann Arbor that's organized by the Alliance for Earth and Land Justice, and everyone else that's just joining because you're curious to hear the wonderful conversation we're going to be having today. The recordings of these conversations are going to be at Ekar's website at ekarfarm.org/Shmita, SHMITA. They're also recorded, available as a podcast, thanks to our partners and the technical host of this series, Hazon. So Bruce from Hazon is kind of running the tech side of things today. Thank you for that, Bruce. And yeah, if you listen to podcasts, you can go to the Joffe Space Podcasts, that's JOFEE, to find recordings of this as well as our past episodes. Also, on Ekar's website, you can find resources and discussion questions if you want to dig deeper into the different topics. The theme today is immigrant rights and immigrant justice, and how is that connected to our themes in the Jewish faith of how we treat folks who are new to land that we've lived on, and how is that all connected to this broader cycle of Shmita. All right, so a couple just kind of tech questions or tech requests. One is that while you are joining us, you keep yourself muted, but keep your screen on so we can see your wonderful faces. There is transcription that's available, and that's automatically set to be on, but you can turn it off by going to closed captioning or CC at the bottom of the screen. And then finally, if you have questions during our conversation today, and we certainly hope you do, or comments or just anything else you want to kind of contribute to the conversation, we really welcome those and are excited for you to put them in the chat window, which you should have access to as part of your Zoom. All right, so I'm going to hand it off to one of the members of our Rhythms of Change cohort here in Denver, Monica, who is going to open us up with an acknowledgement of whatever land we happen to be on, where we're calling in from. Thanks, Monica.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. This land acknowledgement was originally written by Perry Jardin of Pearlstone Retreat Center and modified with permission by Adam Brock and Hannah Perez-Postman. We gather virtually today on stolen land that belongs to no one, but that was tended lovingly for thousands of years by Cheyenne, Ute, Arapaho, and other nations whose names have been lost to history. We did not receive permission to be here, and no amount of words can do justice to the suffering that those nations experienced at the hands of European settlers. Today, we find ourselves in another moment of struggle. Our world and the people on it are convulsed by fevers, both metaphorical and very literal. We are quarantined at home, with civil unrest in the streets, extreme weather ravaging the landscape, and our democracy in peril. And still the sun rises, the birds sing, the rain cools the parched soil. And still love happens and is woven into the fabric of our days. We gather here today in the hope, always present, that love can heal. That the traumas of the past and present can yet be overcome with compassionate learning, collaboration, and graceful action. May this humble gathering serve as a small step towards remembering our true place in the dance of life, a small step on our long path back home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, a overarching theme of these conversations is Shmita, which is 1 year out of 7 in the Hebrew calendar that is about release. And there's all kinds of different things in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible that talk about what that actually looks like in that 1 year out of 7. And as I mentioned earlier, today we're focusing on Shmita and immigrant rights. So we just have a couple texts from the scriptures where you can kind of see some of the things that are discussed in the Torah as it relates to how we treat the immigrant.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I'm going to share my screen with a couple of these texts so folks can look at them before we start our conversation. In the Torah, the word for stranger or immigrant or sojourner is ger, which can be interpreted as all of those meanings. But recently, there have been some scholars and activists who say that immigrant is actually kind of the most accurate and all-encompassing translation of ger, because it means one who sojourns and comes to a space of like moving away from fear, and also can interpret like being in a space of a new place in which both they come from fear and also there may be some fear in those who are in that place already. And so there are a lot of ways in which the Torah can talk about this, and both as like, what is our obligation to welcome folks, and then also what kind of laws do we create that that create rights that apply to everyone. And so this one is, there shall be one law for the citizen and one for the stranger, and for the stranger who dwells among you. So this understanding that like there's a common law that we all must create together and abide by. And then in Shmita specifically, the part that speaks about Shmita in the Torah, the first time it is mentioned, right before then, the text says, a sojourner you are not to oppress, you yourselves know well the feelings of the sojourner, for the sojourners were you in the land of Egypt. And then the next sentence is the first time that the Shmita, which is letting the land rest on the 7th year, is mentioned in the Torah. And so they're all kind of linked together in the same conversation around how do we treat the land and how do we treat each other. And we're using that as the foundation for this conversation today. I will stop sharing my screen. Now.
Thanks, Hannah. So now I'm going to introduce our two amazing conversation partners, and Hannah will be leading the conversation with them. So first, we're joined today by Rosa Sabido. Rosa has lived in the United States for more than 30 years. She currently works as a secretary at a Catholic church in the Western Slope of Colorado. Facing deportation, Rosa sought sanctuary while she works to remain in her community in the country she calls home and to care for her parents, who are US citizens. And for the past 6 years, Rosa has been granted a stay of removal by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement until May 11th, 2017, when the agency declined to grant her most recent request. We're also joined today at the last minute and are so grateful by Sienna Mann, who is an organizing and campaign manager at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. Her work addresses the root causes of forced migration, such as the failures of US imperialism and neoliberalism. She has worked as a paralegal in the sanctuary movement, in grassroots organizing and immigration policy, in places as diverse as Mexico City, El Paso, Texas, Colorado Springs, and now here in Denver. So we're really grateful to be joined both by Rosa and Sienna. Really looking forward to this conversation. And I'm going to hand it off to Hannah to get it going.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, Rosa and Sienna, for joining us in this conversation. Something that I wanted to start with that I was reading in a text about Jewish sanctuary movement was this interpretation of the word ger, and moving away from the understanding of it as the stranger, a person who's a stranger, to someone who's an immigrant. And part of that understanding is that like stranger implies some level of newness and some level of transience. And I was thinking particularly of Rosa, of your story as someone who has been in this country for 37 years. And, you know, stranger is not a word that I would use to describe your relationship to this country and who you are. And so I would just love to hear a little bit about your story and where you've come from, and if you could share about your journey as a person in this country over the last almost 4 decades.
Good morning, and thanks for the invitation. I'm Rosa Sabido, and I have lived in this country for 34 years now. Since the beginning of my decision of remaining in this country, I was pursuing to have a legal status, and that has been a long journey and very painful because unfortunately the immigration laws are not equal and not fair. After trying so many ways and different paths, one of the times on my intention of becoming a permanent resident, I found some people who were fraudulent, and they led me to have an order of deportation. Then when I found out that I had this order of deportation, I did everything possible to remain and fight for my right to stay. And then that's when I had this special permits, like stay of removals are called. And I had to renew that every year since 2008 until 2017. When I then suddenly was denied after I applied for one more year. And the only choice I had, it was to leave the country, go to my supervision schedule, or take sanctuary. If I would go to the supervision, I will be deported. So after living here for 30 years, I made the decision that this is the place where I have the right to stay, because I have lived here for more than half of my life, and I've been working and being a good citizen. And I tried, every way possible to to have a legal status. My mom, during those years, my mom became a citizen, and then we submitted an application in 2001, which it was approved in 2006, but that didn't give me a legal status yet. It will take whatever time it takes to get to my number, because we are a number. That's all we are. So I'm still waiting. I made the decision to come and take sanctuary in June 2nd of 2017. So I'm less than 2 months away for my 4th year inside this church without leaving this building, and remaining and resisting and trying to bring some awareness of the injustice that the immigration community goes through. So unfortunately, while I am in sanctuary, my mom passed in July 2018. She was the main reason for me to stay and take sanctuary, so I could take care of her, because she had some health issues, and she passed. I was not able to be with her. I was not able to spend one of the most important moments of her life, which was her last day, on earth. And that gave me the strength to remain and just fight for justice. And I'm still here waiting for that moment, which I am sure it will come someday.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and the strength and courage and fortitude to say that you are here and you belong here, and to not let the system that tells you otherwise shape your story. That takes a lot of courage, and I really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, what brought you here? And I would love to hear maybe just a little from Sienna about what brings you here today, and your journey to this work, and what moves you as an individual to support folks like Rosa and other immigrants in this country and in Colorado.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you for the invitation. And honestly, it's really an honor to be on this panel with Rosa. As part of, I primarily work and organize with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. And as part of the coalition, we have member organizations that form our base, but also really influence our policy and legislative work, because we have democratic processes and decision making. And Rosa is one of our members. So I've gotten to know her a little bit, but also know her through our organizer on the West Slope. It's really, Rosa's really a leader in our state as we move these demands forward. So my role at CIRC is to lead our state policy work. I'm a campaign manager, and as part of that, I try to connect our grassroots base through our steering committees, which are led by directly impacted people that are directly impacted by the legislation we're trying to pass, to bring their voices to the Capitol and to guide our strategy. Another big part of my job is doing leadership development for organizers and for our members. What led me to this work, just really briefly, there were a lot of different factors from a young age. That one of them is I was raised Jewish and Quaker, and so principles around justice and equity were really influential for me from a young age. My mom was an immigration lawyer, so I heard a lot of stories as a child about our broken immigration system, and I think from a young age had an understanding that the system was not built to accommodate and to welcome asylum seekers, to allow people pathways to staying here. And then also, I think a really big influence that was referenced in my bio is that I had the privilege when I was in college to study in Central America. and I saw really firsthand the impacts of US imperialism and militarism, and the connections that I built there with folks really showed me that like the root causes of immigration, the families split by immigration, the harrowing journeys that people make to arrive at this country are really, in a lot of ways, a result of US foreign policy and imperialism, and both through like the pillaging of Central America, the impacts of free trade agreements, being the leader in like global emissions and corporate extractivism in that region. So when I came back to Colorado, I really wanted to be involved in organizing in a place where, we are the root causes not only of immigration abroad, but also, of course, of the issues that so many folks face within this country of facing the broken immigration system and no ability to gain a lawful status. So I'm really grateful to be at CIRC, and I got connected to CIRC when I was living in Colorado Springs, working with a local organization there called Grupo Esperanza that does work to bring access to driver's licenses to undocumented folks in Colorado through the SB 251 program, which is a really important, amazing program that allows everybody to get a driver's license, which is a document I have taken advantage of my whole life, and it's so challenging to get one as an undocumented person here. And the other work that they were doing was holding the sheriff accountable for collaboration with ICE. So that was really awesome, and we were able to document cases and show that the sheriff was actually unconstitutionally working with ICE and work with the ACLU to sue the El Paso County Sheriff. So I'll pause there. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Sienna. And I hope later in the conversation to hear more about the kind of direct action work and also the policy work and ways that people in this conversation can get involved in the work, both locally in Colorado, and also some ways that there are things happening on the federal level and in other locations that people can plug into. So thank you for that resource. And a thread that I wanted to pull that you had mentioned was kind of the inspiration of your faith growing up around being raised Quaker and Jewish, and how that informs and your understanding of justice, especially as it relates to immigration. And that is something that I think about often as a Jewish person in the Jewish diaspora, is that the history of the Jewish people is often about movement, and is also about tying our faith and our ritual into our history of being displaced and having to move. And that really informs how I see our obligation to help others who are also in that situation for different reasons in different contexts, and also the ways in which I've contributed to the context that cause folks to immigrate to this country seeking something different or seeking relief. And and so I feel like there's a lot of strength in the Jewish Foundation around this inquiry around suffering and resilience. And it makes me, I'm wondering, Rosa, I know that you're living in a church and you've been a secretary of this Catholic church, and I'm wondering how your understanding of faith has informed the way you carry yourself through this journey.
Well, for me, faith is everything. Faith is what it, brought me here. Faith is what it, keeps me here and remain hopeful and faithful that the divine justice will come, because that's the only one that counts. But of course, I was born and raised Catholic. That is something that is always attached to us in everything we do, since we wake up in the morning until we go to sleep. And through faith, I have seen a lot of beautiful things happening in my life and the life of others. So I feel like if that's all what I have everything I need with my faith. And And that is something that nobody can take away from me. You know, I through the faith, at the same time, I know that whatever it happens, it will be in the hands of God and His will. So 180%, my faith, it will never be broken in any way by anyone. It's just very important for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sienna, I saw you on mute. Did you have a response?
I just actually wanted to ask you a question, Rosa. What is it like to be a part of a faith network? Like, I know you're part of a broader network of churches and folks that are organizing this very movement. What is it like to be a part of that broader faith network?
Well, that has been very enriching, and because as Catholic, you usually are involved with the same, people. But by being in this church, which is a Methodist church, I have learned a lot of things, and being involved with others, like at this moment, and the things that I'm hearing, it's just beautiful, because at the end we have everything, one thing in common, which is this believe and trust that there's a high power, and that is always there for us, and to see just jumping from the Catholic environment, which is sometimes is very narrow, to this opening of the beauty of acceptance and diversity that other churches, other other religions offer. And in fact, for me, I have received more from the other churches, other people, other faiths, than the Catholic itself. So that has been painful, but also, I might lost that family for whatever reason they have. They probably are not practicing what they're preaching. And I'm not saying everyone, but I probably lost that family, but I gained like a larger family of many, many people, from different spectrums. So I'm blessed. I'm completely blessed. That's all I can say. This has been a blessing in so many ways. So that will be very ungrateful if I complain about anything, but just being, inside of four walls. But I have gained a different kind of a freedom, and I have met so many beautiful people. So I am blessed. This is the journey of my lifetime, and this is beautiful. I mean, I don't know what is waiting for me after, but this is just that moment that it will stay with me forever. Really. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Sienna, and thank you for that answer, Rosa, and sharing about just both the, the pain and also the joy of finding that larger community. And it makes me think of the invitation of Shmita, which is in that 7th year that all lands become common, and it really is the dropping of borders and barriers so that everyone can like enjoy the fruits of the land together. And in that time, we become this wider community, and we're all supporting each other in that. And there's just a lot of expansiveness there. And so I appreciate you sharing about that piece. And I would love to ask a question that is in the chat right now from Sue. which is about this particular time and place around especially the pandemic and COVID-19, which has impacted everyone and immigrant communities in particular ways. And so I'd love to hear from you both about what you see as happening in the immigrant communities during COVID, and what has it highlighted, and also what you would like to see from allies and accomplices, and how people can engage in supporting immigrants and immigrant rights work at this time in this context.
Well, I can say that for the immigrant community, there's no difference. There have always been like the non-priority place, you know, and as I mentioned to you a few days ago, we are treated by our geographic place in the world, and particularly people from Mexico and down, you know, Latin America. There's always we are always been pushed to the last. If it wouldn't be for this moment where things are moving a little bit with the new administration, the presidential administration, we wouldn't be, you know, even able to get a vaccine or anything. I mean, I just feel like we are just coming out of this big hole, like a dark hole that we were in for 4 years, that it's almost too soon to feel relief, to feel hope, because it was very painful. It was very traumatic, and it has been for a long time. But this moment was, we didn't think we were gonna go through this, and so, you know, being so mistreated in a way that have no rights of, you know, access to food or access to this, you know, funds that were available for everybody, and not access to medical care. So I think the numbers that talk by themselves. So yeah, so hopefully things will change, and it is hard to believe that they are moving, but you know, we have to wait and see.
Sienna, do you have any? Yeah.
I don't have a ton to add. I think Rosa put it really clearly, that immigrants, for all of the reasons that Rosa outlined, were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, in terms of the economic impacts on communities, in terms of not receiving the kinds of benefits and support that lawfully present and individuals and citizens received, and then in terms of the disproportionate health impacts and the really, really grave losses that that immigrant communities faced, and families faced during the pandemic. So I think the only thing I'll add is that, you know, immigrants also suffer disproportionately in terms of in detention. There were multiple outbreaks in the Geo Detention Center in Colorado, where incredibly high numbers of folks were subject to COVID with very minimal medical treatment and care, just like we saw in prisons and jails, in detention centers. Obviously, that impacts people of color disproportionately as well. And I think would love to talk more later about like ways to be involved. I think there's a lot of stuff moving right now. I'm really curious to hear from Rosa how she feels about the work that's moving at the federal level. But I think there's a lot of ways for people to engage with the fights for immigration reform and citizenship for all right now, as well as things on the state level.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, both of you. Yeah, it has been hard 4 years and hard prior to that, and the work is still happening. And yeah, thank you, Sienna, for mentioning the folks in ICE detention, because I know that the systems there really are not set up to treat people with humanity, and the conditions are ones that are like not supportive of health in general. And so with the pandemic, the amount of COVID that spread throughout the detention centers was high, and with people who are already being underfed and mistreated and not represented by the state or the government or supported. Yeah, and then Rosa, you mentioned a couple of times this assessment from, you know, that the immigrants are treated really as a number and not as people, and really like focusing on the ways that impacts what they're receiving and what kind of support that they get from the government. And I'm curious, I guess, a question about like, what does it look like for individuals, like these individuals in this group to move towards bringing the stories of people into this conversation and not talking about immigration as a numbers game, and really like humanizing the experiences of the people, you and the people who are involved in as immigrants in this country.
I'm not sure if I understood the question. Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, I guess like what ways do you feel like you would like to be supported? The story is your story. Like here we're telling your story, and how does that story, how does telling the story move the narrative from numbers to people?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, while us sharing our story and given a like by our experience that we are just make it public, and it's just a work of if people are interested of what's going on with the immigrant community and us to just change the perception of of who we are, and the rhetoric of who we are. So there's a lot of opening from people in this country to listen and to understand, and also through us there's this work of education and raise awareness of what is happening, what is really happening, you know, with the immigration laws and the immigration immigrant rights. So I believe that people, by listening, understanding, and sharing stories, that's the best thing they can do to change this, again, this rhetoric against immigrants. And also by oh, I forgot the word. I'm sorry, I just got distracted. just share the stories, but also understanding that how everyone knows an immigrant from somewhere, either a relative, either a friend, either a neighbor, either a co-worker, an employee, an employer, the people who serves your food, to clean a room where you're staying. I mean, it's just we are here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We are, so it's not that we have, it has to normalize the fact that we are bad people. The talk about, the to believe what others say, that we are bad people. Of course, there's good and bad people all over the place, and it has nothing to do with nationality. And so, it's just to change this perception of who we are. We are as humans, as everybody else. We are just the same. And I cannot get tired enough to repeat that, because that's who we are. I mean, I don't know what would make me different than anybody else, or maybe the fact that I was born in Mexico and learned to speak Spanish, but that's just I mean, I think at this moment is way too absurd to keep thinking about walls and borders, and it's just like it doesn't fit with this times we're living. It doesn't fit anymore. I don't know if that answered your question, but I just get so passionate about this, and sometimes I just go beyond of what I should answer. Thank you.
No, that was great. Thank you. And yeah, just that last note of like, it doesn't fit anymore. What does it look like to dissolve these walls and borders as a nation? And I think about you specifically in sanctuary, being in these, in a very walled and bordered space. And there was a question that came up about a couple of questions about sanctuary. One is if you could maybe share a little bit more about what it means to be in sanctuary for folks who might not know what it is, and what the sanctuary movement is, and how it operates.
Well, a sanctuary, it's a sacred place where it's a sensitive place where it's open to give refuge to people in need. It doesn't necessarily need to be an immigrant, and not necessarily has to be a church. It could be a church, a hospital, or school, which they have some level of respect for those institutions. So in this case, ICE will respect and not go beyond the sacred place walls, and we are protected. We are not hiding. We are just protected because we are public, and the church are not protecting a criminal. They're just keeping a person in this special needs, safe while we are doing this work. Again, it's like it could be a church, it could be a synagogue, could be like a temple, it could be a school or a hospital where they decide to keep this person's protected. I believe this the sanctuary movement itself started in the mid 80s by opening the churches to refugees from Central America who were coming, you know, fleeing from the civil wars in the military in their own countries, and um, and then stopped for a long time until um, um, the beginning of the 2000s. That's when people, you know, started having the need to have a place to feel safe, and they just took that movement again. They revived that movement with immigrants running from the ICE, you know, the policies, or and now we have been about, you know, fluctuating from 150 people down to 50, you know, the years, um, from countries from, you know, all over the world, not only Hispanic, but you know, from different countries. And so what we have been trying to do as a sanctuary movement is just um, to be listened, to be seen, to for them to know that there's not only like this DACA people or the TPS people, but there are also the people in sanctuary who we know we have the right to fight, but we don't have any more legal venues to look for that relief. So that's how we started, you know, creating this sanctuary movement, and then we do it locally at our own churches and communities, and then we are part of something bigger, and also to show the need of an immigration reform, and to prove that how the immigration laws are broken. The system is so broken, and it's just doing nothing but damaging people, and they're just like really are just choosing a very few people to have the right to become citizen. So we are fighting for ourselves, we are fighting for our communities, and we are fighting for the 11 million of people, and we are fighting for this immigration reform that is really, really needed. Because the last time there was a real immigration reform was in 1986, which we're talking about, you know, 36 years ago, 35 years ago. So I mean, you know, how can not be so many people coming illegally if there is not a way to, you know, come to this country in the right way? Nobody who comes to this country wants to come illegally, but there's no other choice. Nobody wants to remain. We all love our countries. I can just, you know, say that every person who comes and it's an immigrant, it loves their country of origin, but we don't have a way to travel back, to go back, to live there, to come to work, you know. So that's what it looks like. We are just coming in numbers and want it to stay, but no, it's because there are not laws that allow us to, you know, be um, legal or documented, or whatever you want to call it, because there's so many names, and then just do what we are to do, and just, you know, um, just live a normal life, you know. It's just it's very complicated, and it's so much, but it's also very necessary.
Thank you. Thank you for giving, that, helping us understand a little bit more what it means to be in sanctuary and what it means to be constantly up against these processes and still holding love for the countries where you come from and for your family and for your life and your reason to being here, that we can hold all of that together. And just the, and that it's, that in sanctuary is there's, you're seen, it's not hidden. And so many people have to hide for various reasons. And so the opportunity of sanctuary is there's a visibility and a calling in to see the stories and hear what is happening for people. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm wondering, Sienna, there's a couple of questions about contemporary issues around sanctuary. One about a lawsuit against ICE and Homeland Security. I'm wondering if you know anything about this around fines that had been issued to people in sanctuary, fines up to $60,000 for, I'm assuming this is in the last administration, for sanctuary, and wondering if you had any information or about this particular issue. And one thing I also wanted to share is when you're talking about ICE, Rosa, is that, and the history of these movements, ICE was formed in 2003, which is not that long ago. And so sometimes we think about these as like fixed institutions or programs or policies, but it's very helpful to remember that they were made by people and we can dismantle them as people, and that the history of them is one that is, available to recent memory. So Sienna, do you have any, do you know about this lawsuit? And
I do a little bit. I'm sure Rosa knows more than me. I know that there's, there were a total of almost $3 million in fines against several women in sanctuary that, basically they were fined because they did not leave, they didn't follow their removal orders and decided to take sanctuary. And I know the case is arguing around like the kind of religious freedom and freedom of speech. I don't have any other updates or anything else to add, so I can pass it back to Rosa to share more. If there's anything you want to add on that, Rosa.
I think that was close to accurate information. Yes, I know other people in sanctuary who had this fines. They're up to $700,000 a person. So they were getting charged like $500 and some per day that they remain in the country. So they are fighting for against the government for this crazy fines because they don't have the money. But yeah, they every day they remain in the country. There's a quote of close to $600 a day. Yeah.
Is it okay if I jump in? I just wanted to really highlight something that Rosa shared, that our movement in Colorado is like very specific about calling for citizenship for the 11 million. And something that we see happening at the federal level right now is that like the solutions being proposed, the 4 bills that are moving forward slowly through Congress do not provide citizenship to the 11 million. The bills are varying degrees of horrible and limited, and really carve out very specific groups to offer solutions to. And one of the carve outs that we see across all 4 bills is around criminalization. So there are criminal carve outs in every single one of the bills that are moving forward that say if you have certain criminal charges, and the bills actually expand, there are already criminal carve outs. So, if you have been charged with or have been found guilty of a crime, that can really be a barrier to you being able to adjust your status. But these bills that are moving forward, all 4 of them expand on those restrictions. And so one thing that we're doing at CIRC is calling on the Biden administration to take administrative action, because there are a lot of things that Biden can do right now to halt deportations and to reassess the cases that are on the immigration court docket, reassess cases like Rosa's and all of the other folks facing sanctuary that have in some ways exhausted the pathway that exists for people to be able to be here legally. And those are things that are not going to be resolved through any of the bills that are moving forward, that are imperfect reform bills. And so we, of course, want legislative and permanent legislative solutions and immigration reform, but we want it for the 11 million. And we also want immediate action now to resolve, cases like Rosa so that they can be reassessed, so that people have like justice in their day in court when that was so unjustly, when action was so unjustly taken in the past. And on that note, I just want to invite people to an event that we're doing. There are forums happening across the country as part of the All Eyes on Ice, We Are Home campaign that are calling on Biden to take action in the first 100 days. So I can share that in the chat. But I think that's a really important thing that's happening right now, in addition to the ways that the legislation is moving through Congress.
Great, and that's perfect timing because as we're nearing the end of our conversation in these last 5 minutes, we'd love for you to share more of this, kind of like what's happening right now and where can folks take action, both in cases like yours, Rosa, so with sanctuary and the sanctuary movement, and then also on the larger federal, legislative, local policy level. And then another question in the chat that maybe we can squeeze into that call to action is around education and around the historical factors that have led to immigration from Central and Latin America. And the US imperialist role in creating the conditions that cause people to immigrate. So that's a lot of things, but if you are able to share about some of these and some concrete actions and steps and ways people can continue to educate themselves and actually take action to support and move this work forward as allies and in solidarity.
Is that a question for?
Both, but if you'd like to start, Rosa, that would be great.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of groups around your area, wherever you live, where you can support, get involved, find out about their work, just to get really involved in any of those. I'm sure you can always help someone in your community, in your small community, or your large community, or the country. I mean, there are a lot of organizations, and there's a lot of work going on right now, in so many ways for the pro-immigrant communities. And also, I know there sometimes they take things for a moment and they just leave it on the side and they just go to a different focus. And that's how the immigrants have been play a role of just a game in the government. We're just a game, where they play power and they're at the end they do nothing. So if when they invite you for an action, to sign a letter, to sign an action, a request, please do it, because that will help. Thank you.
On that note, there's a couple actions that I would love to invite everyone here to take. We're running a couple of campaigns on the state level right now. We're in legislative session in Colorado. One of the campaigns that's really relevant to this conversation is the campaign for universal representation in immigration court. We're trying to create a state fund that would actually provide pro bono legal services to immigrants facing detention in Colorado. So as we kind of alluded to, immigrants are not guaranteed representation in immigration court. And that leads to 70% of people representing themselves against the US government. People are 10 times more likely to win their cases if they have a lawyer. And they're like 7 times more likely to get released on bond. So people are detained, Coloradans are detained and are facing a judge with no representation, trying to navigate a complex legal system because they can't afford to hire a private lawyer, which can cost between $5,000 to $30,000. So we're trying to create a fund. that would be like both public and private dollars that would get nonprofits basically to provide services to immigrants in detention. And we're actually going to have a call to action this week to support this bill and another bill that we're running. And you can sign on onto these links, and we'll be in touch with you about the calls to action. We would really love your support. We're going to be reaching out to legislators to say that, that we want them to both fund and also help pass these two pieces of legislation. So would love that support. And then I'm sure we'll have other calls to action from the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition on the federal level. So you can follow us on Facebook or look at our website, Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, to find out more as those things come.
Great, thank you for those concrete ways in which we can all participate in this work. And again, thank you, Rosa, for sharing your story and sharing your heart with us in this conversation. And yeah, if there's any last words, we're at 11, which is our time. And we welcome everyone to join us for our next conversation, which will be in April. I'm sorry, this is April, in May, around food justice in the food system with Dr. Damian Thompson and Paul Sherman from an organization, The Zone. It should be a great, juicy conversation. And yeah, just any final words from Rosa. Sienna, thank you again for joining us.
My only final words is that I just want to invite folks to also support Rosa's organization. Rosa belongs here. Rosa is the founder of this organization. As you can hear, it's a national leader in the sanctuary movement. And it's really important that we show our support to the sanctuary leaders who are taking such sacrifice. So you can also support her directly through Rosa Belongs Here. And I encourage everyone to do so.
Thank you, Sienna. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for the panel who attended, and thank you, Adam. Thanks for the invitation. That's all I can say. God bless you, and thanks for the work you're doing. And just don't quit, don't forget, don't put it on the side. Just, you know, our future is in your hands. That's for sure. I mean, you know, you are our voice, because we're not listened. They listen to you. And so thank you for all this work that you're doing. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And have a good Sunday for the, yeah, just really deep gratitude for the work that you're doing and for coming to this panel today. Rhythm of Change, our cohort will meet in 10 minutes in our Zoom room. So please have a little break before then, and everybody have a really wonderful Sunday, and let's keep doing the work to amplify the voices of immigrants in this country and do what we can to share our resources for the rights of all. Okay, thank you. Bye.